Excuse me. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Testing 1, 2. Levels are good. Checking the levels. Okay. All right. So let me do this one last thing. I will type it here. Please let me know if there are any lag or audio issues. Oops. Boom. Boom. Oh, hello. Nadia? Oh, hello. Yep. Nadia, always in the house. Cool. Good evening. Yep. Hello. Yes. Hello. This is Black Ponderer, a YouTube channel that focuses on philosophy. In case you're new, is there any way for me to turn that down on my? It's a little loud. I don't think I can. I think that's to like kind of partially hold that to my ear. It's a little loud. Yeah, so this is a YouTube channel about philosophy. Black Ponderer, what's up? And if you're new or you're watching later on in the recording, yeah, we talk about philosophical texts, and then we talk about the themes in the text, and we do the supplementary commentary of the text. Excuse me, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm coughing. Yeah, so we've been doing these live streams for a while, and that's kind of been my primary way of doing videos nowadays because just been, not only have I been kind of busy, although I've been reading a lot of like more practical books that focus less on philosophy, more on practice. And usually I reserve the live streams for more just like, just kind of themes and less about text. But since I haven't been really reading that many books about philosophy specifically, but I have been reading a lot of like excerpts from books. I was like, okay, well, we'll just do that with the live stream. So, but it's still, with these live streams, with Black Ponderer live streams, what we try to focus on is more, they're just hangout sessions. I gotta pretend like we're hanging out. I mean, we're not pretending, that's actually what we're doing. We're just hanging out. So, it's more of conversation. It's not lectures. I'm not talking at you. I'm talking with you. So feel free to engage in the conversation and feel free to have some side conversation and some tangents. And we don't have to finish what we're talking about. Last live streams we had to split it up into 2 parts because we just went all over the place, which is fine. We're just hanging out, we're having a good time. That's more the live stream vibe. So yeah, just letting you know that, in case you want to chat in the comment section, or if you want to just throw out some comments later on the bottom. But today what we're talking about is this excerpt from this text right here. I don't know what's up with this cover, but there it is. I think that's like a dead chick, which is not the nicest thing to look at, but I guess that deals with what's being talked about here. It's interesting, but it's called The Queer Art of Failure. It's by Judith Halberstam, and we are going to be talking about just an excerpt here, not the whole book, but I don't know, a chapter. I don't know what chapter this is. Did they tell me? Oh, it's just the intro. This is the introduction. All right, so let me go ahead and bring up the what I wrote in my description. Yeah, so what are we talking about? We got to be throwing out a lot of topics here. So this is specifically queer theory. We're talking about queer theory. In case you don't know, that's part of like kind of the third wave of feminism. First wave feminism is just like, yeah, women are people too, because Unfortunately, we lived in a time when you know, it was considered, we didn't live it, you know, I didn't live through this time, although, you know, a lot of, we're still struggling with, you know, gender equality and such, but there was a time where that, you know, it wasn't even, women were just property, right? And so that was the first wave. That was back in the 1800s or earlier. And then the second wave, feminism, came out, and that was more focused on like, more about economics. It's like, well, women deserve to be making the same amount of money as men, and they deserve to be in the workplace. And you know, the women and men should be the same type of. It was more that's more the second wave feminism. First wave is just like, well, women are people, which is, you know, that was the first wave. Second wave is like, well, workplace. It kind of focused a lot on like the workplace, right? And then the third wave came in. It's like, okay, let's take it out of the capitalism and let's kind of bring in like other forms of social injustice, like racism and classism, and you know. Oh, let me close this. I had my CD player open. I don't know, but yeah, and also talking about like you know, queerness, right? Queerness is another thing that was kind of central to that. And then, you know, it's about like, well, why are we thinking about this only in like a man-woman dynamic, right? You know, gender is a spectrum. You know, gender was starting to get pushed as an idea. And, you know, there's a such thing as non-binary, gender non-conforming. And what about if you're like gender non-conforming, transness started coming into the fold. And, you know, that's the third wave, started ushering that intersectionality, right? So black feminism, right, brought that on the table. And now we have queer theory, right? And so that's what we're talking about today using this text. And there's all types of topics that we're going to discuss. One thing about queer theory that will become apparent is like, it's not just about gender or sex, right? Queer theory is about also just about human nature and like, you know, what it means to be a human being, and like you know, oppression throughout multiple spectrums, and so it's about a lot of stuff, right? And so what I threw out here in my description is the white picket fence with the 2.5 kids, so the American dream, right? When people come to America, although that's kind of dead now, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is, right? Nowadays, like people across the world see America as like, yeah, not too great of a country right now, right? Across the board, only people who are still thinking that are like MAGA people, right? Everybody else, specifically Americans who are not in the MAGA cult, they're like, yeah, this place really isn't as good as it was advertised. So, but the whole thing was like, yeah, come here. You get married, you buy a house, you have 2.5, you know, 2 to 3 kids. You get your dog and your cat and your fish in the fish bowl, and you get your nice green front lawn with a picket fence, and then I've achieved the American dream, right? But that is so. But the thing is, like, is that being questioned? Like, you know, because the article kind of questions, it kind of throws out the idea. It's like, wow, the American dream, the fantasy of that is like, it's not, people don't strive for that anymore. But I would say like, I don't know, I think people still are kind of holding on to that. And, you know, that kind of patriarchal capitalistic type of idea, even though like, yeah, that kind of situation can have lots of security. You can have a lot of security, right? Like having a home, you know, having a family that's like considered normal, quote unquote, you know, acceptable in society. It can afford you a lot of privilege, social privilege. So there's that, and that's part of why, like, are we really, is that really being pushed back against? I don't know. Isn't there still a strong societal yearning to continue that pursuit? Mm-hmm. So we question that. And then falling outside of patriarchal norms can provide the opportunity to recreate some of the meaning of gender. Okay. Can gender then mean a creation of how one defines their being? Okay. So the question there is, when you start considering gender, right? The concept of gender outside of, the idea of sex, meaning the binary, the man, the female, biological definition. When you start pulling the concept of gender away from that, you start like freeing yourself to various identifiers and various like modes of being human being. So is that what queerness is? Is like we're starting to consider other ways of being that are true to like what human nature is and are outside the norm, right? Or the norm meaning like societal expectation, the status quo, right? Which it could necessarily be false, not correct. And I see Jeremy's in the house. Hello. Excuse me. And then I say the meaning of failure can be a way of becoming and unbecoming, and that this dialectical contradiction proposes a different relation to knowledge. Considering the current state of politics, are we in a moment of unbecoming that can offer us a new avenue of constructive knowledge? Okay, so one of the things the article, we'll talk more in depth about all these things, right? The article talks about failure is a good thing. When we fail, that gives us the opportunity to grow, and it also questions like who we are, and it allows us to be like, well, maybe we're something else, and then we can build off of that, right? So when we consider the current state of politics, and we consider like kind of the failure of a lot of political institutions to like support the citizens, right? And we kind of maybe even see the failure of the American dream, right, as this kind of like myth that never really was, or even like the failure of reaching that myth, like, oh, I don't have that. Maybe that's a way it offers us a new avenue to like, well, is that something we really should be striving for? Is that something that, what really is this country, America, or not just America, the Americas, right? These like quote unquote first world countries, Europe, Canada, all these European, Japan, all these like, what they call it, developed nations, right? We look at these nations and it's like, well, are they good? Are they like the best? What gauge are we using to judge like the success of these countries? And maybe we should be like looking for other ways of like determining whether, these countries are providing success, because in many ways they are failing, right? They're failing. So it's interesting. So we'll start going into depth about this by reading some quotes. All right, so put this aside. All right. So here in the Black Ponderer, what we do is we read quotes from the text, right? That's what we do. I read the article, and then just quotes that I find very interesting and kind of pop out to me. I kind of highlight them sometimes and put notes next to them, and then I talk about like, how does this make me feel? Or what am I thinking? What does this bring about? And then I kind of use that as a kind of a diving board or a jumping off point to get into like a philosophical theme. So that's what we're about to do. What baffles me with the so-called American dream is that it takes debts to keep up with the lifestyle. Yeah, and then there's this idea of, there's such things as good debt. Have you ever heard of that? I've heard of that. I've actually, I remember back in the day when they were teaching, they would have, in high school, they tried these half-ass approaches to like teach finance. But they're like, it's good to have credit cards, and it's good to, you got to play the game, right? You got to like get a good credit score to like be able to do shit. I get that, but is that ultimately a good thing? Like, okay, playing the game, you got to do that, but so what is it? The master's tools, right? But yeah, that was this whole idea of good debt. like, which is what, like, oh, college debt or like mortgages. You know, it builds your credit score, and it builds your you know, your record. So it proves to financial institutions like, oh, this is a responsible person. They know how to handle debt. But really, it's just like, you're just flagging financial institutions like banks and credit unions is like, oh, okay, we can put, this person knows how to handle debt, so we can put them in debt, and then we can make money off of them, you know, through interest and shit. That's what's happening, right? I'm reading a lot of post-growth theory. Yes, I remember you were bringing that up in a number of streams. And one of the main principles is that we should not base the well-being of countries on GDP. Right. GDP is a very poor indicator of the well-being of countries. A lot like how you know, old school healthcare, what I think it was called BMI, body mass index, or whatever the fuck it was called, right? That, you know, it's kind of the same shit, right? Like you create these arbitrary KPIs, key performance index. I'm a project manager, so like, you know, that's like my day job. So we use all these metrics to gauge performance, and a lot of these things, like, you know it's bullshit, but you do it anyway because it tells you certain things about certain stuff. But yeah, GDP is just like, yeah, you know, it's a way to gauge a very narrow aspect of like how capital flows through the economy. But, you know, does it tell you anything about the actual welfare of human beings that live it? No, right? In fact, like, oftentimes GDP is a high, you know, good indicators of GDP represents like the nation, the country probably doesn't give a shit about its citizens. Right? It cares more about the flow of its capital than it is its citizens. You know, yes, that's true. Yeah, that's what is common to do. Right. That should not exist or should never happen in the first place. Hello. But, you know, we prioritize that, so that's interesting. All right. I'm reading this quote just from the introduction here. The introduction of this book, it's called Low Theory, and that's all we're going to read today because that's the excerpt I read. And I just highlighted here a cynical resignation on the one hand and naive optimism on the other. What is the alternative? Oh, okay, yeah, I remember this because so one of the funny things about this text is that it quotes all these crazy, you know, I guess, what is it? Not that. It's not doing that. It's quoting a lot of, or it's citing a lot of references that you wouldn't normally see in academic research. So it cites a lot of like SpongeBob SquarePants, which is funny. I never got into SpongeBob SquarePants. It seems okay. It seems like a good show, but I guess I was like, you know, I was like just at the mark where I was too old to watch that show or like appreciate that show. But there's this citation. They're quoting this point where SpongeBob is talking to somebody. I think Mr. Krabs or whatever about. They're talking about the woes of gift shops. I think, oh yeah, that Mr. Krabs says like, hey, you gotta watch out for those nets. You know, the fishermen people, they cast these nets, and you'll get like caught in the nets, and then you'll get cooked, and then you'll be in a restaurant. And then SpongeBob was like, oh no, that's horrible. Like, what could be worse than that? And then Mr. Krabs is like, well, what's worse is if you're in a gift shop, right? That's even worse. It is, and you're like, huh? But what they saw these two things being eaten at a restaurant because the crabs get eaten, or like you get placed in a gift shop. These two things. So what's being said there is like, what's worse, right? Being like eaten alive by the system, by the destructive system, or being part of the system, right? Being part of the system in a gift shop. And so, like, the word that the author uses is, so a cynical resignation of, like, I'm just going to be part of this fucked up system, whatever, I don't care. Or naive optimism, where it's like, oh, I will be a part of the system, and then you get, like, destroyed by the system. So apathy or selling out, right? Right, is what's happening. So they bring that up. Let's see. How do you know the brand Carhartt? Do you know the brand Carhartt? No, I don't know that. It is quality, practical clothing that was made for working class people but co-opted by hipsters. I saw a meme that said, "You are not allowed to wear a Carhartt if you know what KPI means." Yeah, well, I don't. I guess maybe that means I'm not a hipster, but I know what KPI is. It's funny. It's funny. I was just reading. That is hilarious. Because I will be making a video about this. I've been reading the Anarchist Cookbook, which is not the original Anarchist Cookbook that just talks about how to make bombs, like homebrew bombs. But this is another Anarchist Cookbook in response to the old school, which was written by some of the founders of Food Not Bombs, that activist group. And they talk about, like, co-ops in the book, and they talk about how co-ops aren't very successful because co-ops basically get co-opted, right? So they ultimately don't work. Sometimes, they have very limited success, but not really. And that's a perfect example, right? The Carhartt. If I'm even pronouncing that correctly, I don't know. SpongeBob has so many adult jokes that millions of children watched, and it's fun. Yeah, it's like one of the first cartoons that were specifically for kids but had, like, adult jokes. Like, not like, well, it did have some, like, crude humor, but it was more like adult jokes in the sense that very mature, like, thought-provoking ideas that, a lot of, like, cartoons back then thought were too advanced for kids to understand. But SpongeBob, they went there. Another show that tried to do that but was very unsuccessful was, in my opinion, was Animaniacs. I remember watching that show. They would have a lot of adult humor, but the adult humor was so, like, it was too referential. Like, they based a lot of it was just, like, citing, like, old ass 1950, like, black and white movies, and that's pretty much all. So it's like, if you're not savvy to, like, old school black and white films, a lot of the humor in Animaniacs would kind of just go over your head, which is like, so I think they did it unsuccessfully. But with SpongeBob, I think they did it correctly. I realize that my failures in the job market happened because I don't play games and I stand alone based on the essay you are explaining. Right. So that's kind of the point that we'll get into. It's like, failure can be a good thing because you're failing in the job market. Like, is that really bad? Well, kind of, because now you can't afford, like, to pay your rent, right? So there's that. But do you want to succeed in this job market? I mean, it's hard out here. It's hard out here. Let me read you some more quotes. So loses the idealism of hope in order to gain wisdom and a new spongy relation to life, culture, knowledge, and pleasure. So we're still on the SpongeBob thing. The spongy relation to life. So loses the idealism of hope, right? So this idea, like, yeah, if I just, like, work within the system of capitalism, if I can just lean in, then I'll be saved, right? If I actually, I'm hopeful that the American dream can actually work. And the article is arguing, like, well, maybe we should just kind of ditch that. Like, maybe putting our hope into that is not gonna bring us to satisfaction, right? Instead, maybe we could like fail and be like, you know, I have no hope in these like failed institutions. Right? I need to figure out where I could derive meaning in life, culture, knowledge, and pleasure in other areas. Right? Animaniacs was sadly underrated. I think it had some good moments, um, but I don't know. I think honestly, I would say like Animaniacs is a little overrated, but maybe that's just my opinion. I think it fell flat in many ways. Uh, yeah, yeah, which is because of a lot of reasons that I said before. Yeah, I think I'm of the opinion that Animaniacs is kind of overrated, but maybe not because I don't think that cartoon stood the test of time like SpongeBob did, where it's kind of like SpongeBob is kind of timeless, like kind of keep where like Animaniacs is kind of one of those shows that nobody really watches that anymore, and like newer generations don't really fall back to that show, but I don't know. A basic desire to live life otherwise. Right. Because we're like, can we? Maybe I don't want to aspire for the American dream, right? Maybe I want to do other things that are more based off of truth rather than this fantasy that doesn't actually happen. Search for different ways of being in the world and being in relation to one another than those already prescribed for the liberal and consumer subject, which is what neoliberalism, right? Which is a term thrown all over the place, but I think it applies here, where now the term liberal, is used negatively in many in many ways, right? It's used negatively by people on the far right. You crazy liberal, which is like a derogatory way of labeling liberal, right? And then there's people who are who belong in the left, and then they even say like, "Oh, I'm not a liberal." Like those liberals are just like basically what they're saying is like they're neoliberals, right? Which is like, or you start falling into like another, I would say, kind of synonym nowadays is like libertarian, which I think sometimes when people did today's language, people will say liberal, and kind of a lot of times what they mean is libertarian, which is a word in and of itself is kind of changed over time. Like libertarian used to mean like anarchist, right? But now like that's nowhere near what libertarian means anymore. So yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so makes his peace with the possibility that alternatives dwell in the murky waters of a counterintuitive, often impossibly dark and negative realm of critique and refusal. So embracing the unknown and the alternative, right? So like, yeah. So where do we find meaning in life? Where does meaning derive? Are my levels? Could just check in my levels here. Okay. Looks good. Let me just make sure that I'm good to go here. Am I excellent condition? Okay, that's all. Just wanted to see that excellent condition. All right, so yeah, embracing the right. So yeah, this idea of like you fail, now what? Where are we? Where are we now? Where are we going? Like, uh, and maybe that's where it lies. It's like, well, if I don't reach the American dream, what could I reach? And like that moment of like, I don't know what's going on, or like that's where that point of, okay, I have to create a new way of being. Right? That's not reliant to these social institution structures of power. Right? Maybe that's where we need to be going. Right? All right, a more chaotic realm of knowing and unknowing, right? Think about ways of being and knowing that stand outside of conventional understandings of success. Success in a heteronormative, that's another big word, heteronormative. Capitalist society equates too easily to specific forms of reproductive maturity combined with wealth accumulation. So, what is that? Reproductive maturity combined with wealth accumulation. That's what the American dream. All right. Well, we said the white picket fence, wealth accumulation, white picket fence house, reproductive maturity to two to three kids, right? And that's what we gauge success in, right? Which is what? Heteronormative and capitalist, right? But these measures of success have come under serious pressure recently. So, I mean, my question is, have they? I guess, there are now lots of, I guess I would say movements, right? Whether it's, academic movements like queer theory, or just like, a lot of like, honestly, a lot of it is like queer culture that's pushing it back against this notion, which I think is getting quite popular, which is why there's this antagonistic push, right, against queerness, right? That's like very popular and really big now, right? Because it's seen as a threat against that reproductive maturity combined with wealth accumulation as a measure of success, where it's like, well, maybe I don't want that. Maybe I don't want to have 2 to 3 kids, or I don't even want. I don't want to have kids, period, right? Or, maybe I'm not obsessed with like wealth accumulation. Maybe that's not the point. And a lot of that is not only, I would argue like a lot of that is from like queerness is kind of paving the way for that. I mean, there are other areas being as well that are kind of pushing that forward. But I don't know. I think queerness is at the forefront. Queer ways of being is at the forefront of that kind of push toward like, okay, maybe we should start measuring success off of other ways of being. So then it's like, so there in that way there is serious pressure against those forms of success. But however, there's this huge antagonistic pressure too. So that's why I'm like, well, you can't just discount. I mean, there's this huge backlash against it, right? So there's still lots of people who are like, no, we got to hold on to this. This is the way to do. This is the way we get success. So I don't know. That's something to consider. That's where we're at. Failing is something queers do and have always done exceptionally well. For queers, failure can be a style. That's what the text says. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And then use these negative effects to poke holes in the toxic positivity of the contemporary life. Mm-hmm. And what is this toxic positivity? And the article expresses it as a mass delusion, which is what? American exceptionalism. This idea like, oh, America is this land of the free and home of the brave. Right. And, I'm just using the United States of America as an example because that's the country where I'm from. And, it has been traditionally been the case that America has been this bastion. It has been, put forth as this bastion of freedom and opportunity, where it has always been far from the truth. It's been a bastion of freedom and opportunity for a minority of people, right? And I think the reality of that is beginning to show more and more, where like we look at the state of the United States of America now, and people are like, whoa, what's going on here? And people like me and like I would argue lots of black people, like black feminists, have been saying way before I was born, right? Like, it's always been fucked up like this. And now it's just like, now everybody's getting to see the reality of the situation. And so, like, a lot of these black feminists who were queer, like, people like Bell Hooks, for instance, or like, or not even just black feminists, maybe, uh, you know, like Jewish feminists like Judith Butler, for instance, another person that has always said, like, yeah, no, um, America has always had these fundamental problems, and are we actually the exception to, like, to, like, are we this bastion of success? No, right? And so, my argument is, and the article argues, is like, and these people I'm throwing out here, Bell Hooks, Judith Butler, and we can go on with examples like this. They've been considered by the institutions and even within some circles of academia, as like, oh, these are failures, right? But these failures are showing you these quote unquote failures are showing you these these truths, these realities that are factual, right? And you should have been listening to what these people have been talking about for a while. Maybe we would not be so deep into this mess that we're in now, right? That's one thing I noticed and experienced. Toxic positivity breeds insecure and delusional people. Right. Positive thinking, let me piggyback off what you're saying. Positive thinking is offered up in the U.S. as a cure for cancer, a path to untold riches, and a surefire way to engineer your own success. Indeed, believing that success depends upon one's attitude is far preferable to Americans than recognizing that their success is the outcome of the title or the tilted scales of race, class, and gender. Right. So we have this this absurd idea of like, oh, the success is about how hard you work, and that's like so far from the truth. Here in the developed countries, it's not about like how hard you work. In fact, like some of the people who work the hardest get the least, right? It's about intergenerational wealth, right? Which people who have intergenerational wealth, on average, don't work as hard as people who don't have intergenerational wealth, right? And the outcome of tilted scales of race, class, and gender. Of course, like all these social economic identifiers and forms of oppression dictate how quote unquote successful, and we're just talking about financially stable, right? We are, right? And you can put that into stuff like, even I even put on my notes like law of attraction and manifesting, right? This idea like, if I believe something will happen, then it will happen, or I just got to put the idea out there and then it'll come to me. It's like, yeah, that doesn't work for for a lot of people, right? And then the argument is like, well, they just didn't believe hard enough, or they didn't manifest hard enough, and it's like, well, no, maybe it's because they were a black trans person, and this society is like not does not favor that particular identity or that particular way of being, because it goes counter to the hierarchical power structures where those ways of being threaten power in this country. So therefore they're targeted, and there's a lot of adverse, and that's what's going on, right? Or it's not just that they're not manifesting their success. Like, that's not what's happening. So yeah, that idea of positive thinking, and we need to question that. I don't like it when some people simply just work and go home, but the system forces us to do more, right? Right. Yeah, right. This idea of like, do your day job, and then like, then you get your side hustle. You gotta get your side hustle because, and then that's the way you be successful. People who work 9 to 5 days a week or more, and then they say they're too tired to they're lazy. It's like, what the fuck are you talking? But these are the ways we excuse um, the discrimination, the oppression that our power structures put onto us. Right? That's how we excuse that away, right? But yeah, no, that's true. Hello, Scion, Teddy's. Oh yeah, I'm sure I butchered that name. Sorry, but very true. Also, systematic factors that determine quality of life and opportunities that are offered to them. Yep, true that. And law of attraction manifestation scream goddamn witchcraft. Nothing against witches though, but I don't like presumably atheistic people talking that shit. Well, I have some good friends who are witches, and but yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I mean, you bring up a good point. You bring up a good point, but like everything gets co-opted, right? I mean, positive thinking, like, I mean, it's been scientifically proven that, if you believe something, if you have a positive outlook on life, or if you like, throw something, if you keep thinking that you're going to achieve something, it's more likely that that you'll achieve something. It's like the placebo effect, or like, it's like our brains are hardwired that way, but that, the thing is that only goes so far. Right? With the law of attraction, man, they kind of put that like on this huge, they like magnify it in unrealistic proportions, right? Right. That's the problem, and a lot of that magnifying has to do with like, oh, now like the law of attraction manifestation is like, it's become this capitalist thing where people sell books about laws of, you go to the self-help section, and half the books are like about law of attraction shit, and people are now making money off of it. And so that's part of like, why it's kind of going off the rails, and that's more what I'm critiquing, like that kind of like the co-optation of law of attraction. Some of that is like, it's cool, and like, and some of the science has shown like, yeah, that's kind of, there's a little truth to that, but the way that's advertised now, like, it's just like, it's fake. But that's like almost all things get co-opted in that way, which is sad. While capitalism produces some people's success through other people's failures, which is what, exploitation, the ideology of positive thinking insists that success depends only upon working hard, and failure is always of your own doing, right? How deeply Americans want to believe that health is a matter of attitude rather than environmental degradation, and that wealth is a matter of visualizing success rather than having the cards stacked in your favor, right? We don't want to believe in this. And I love how the article says how deeply Americans want to believe, right? Because we in America, we're in this like delusional state. It's sad. And I think this is a moment where hopefully people will start waking up. But is that going to happen? It's hard to tell. I don't have an answer to that. I wish. Hopefully, people, we gotta start waking and get out of these states of delusion, right? And a lot of it, like, it's fear, because if you stop believing in these false narratives, you have to start owning your responsibility in your contribution in the exploitation of the system, which is that's scary to do, and I respect that fear. I acknowledge, like, but we got to start being brave and be like, oh shit, I'm partly responsible for this shit, so now I need to like take responsibility and kind of like push these myths away, right? And I think that's the hard part, right? The accepting the responsibility. I've never met any witches. What makes someone a witch? Oh, that's cool. Like, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. But I guess, a witch is somebody who casts spells. Like, you never like, well, not everybody who's into crystals considers themselves witches. But if like, yeah, I guess that's not everybody. But like people who collect crystals, like lapis lapis lazuli, or I don't know. A lot of times I don't know how to pronounce shit, or like amethyst, or like emeralds or quartz, and they believe like they hold some sort of powers in them. I like collecting crystals, but I don't believe they have any powers. Like this stuff. Oh, you can't even see. I like collecting gemstones and stuff. But a lot of people think it's like some sort of power, and like they help you in your love life or something like that. Which I'm not knocking that, but some people collect crystals because they're pretty. Some people collect crystals because they think it gives them energy in their auras and stuff. And that's kind of like witchy. But I guess But then there's some people who like they literally cast spells and stuff. You can like YouTube that. There's like a huge witchy YouTube community where they like give you tutorials on casting spells. Yeah, it's a whole thing, right? Yeah, I remember like when I first encountered that, and I'm like, oh wow, which is that's the still a thing in the world. I thought that was just something that didn't happen anymore, but apparently it does. Do you know people who cast spells? Oh yeah, I know people who cast spells. Uh, Cast spells on other people. Oh yeah, I know people who cast spells. Although they have some sort of ethics, they have a code of conduct, right? Which it's important because they believe that the spells actually have power. So they're like, well, you don't cast spells on people without their consent, which I respect that. But honestly, like in my, personally, like you can cast a spell on me without my consent because I don't believe it really has any power. So I'm not tripping about that. But that's just me. Crystals don't even possess powers. They are simply beautiful works of nature, God. Yeah. They're pretty. They're pretty. But, they have a big gemstone festival like every year. I forgot what it's called. I think it's just called like Memphis, because I live in the city of Memphis. Memphis Gemstone Fair or something. And they, it's awesome. You can go buy fair. And then oftentimes you can find stuff on the ground. Like this bad boy. Oh, it's so heavy. What is this? I don't even know. I need like a gem expert. It shines. I found this on the ground. I was just walking across the street and I found this on the ground. It's pretty. And I live in the city, so it's just weird. Sometimes you find like all types of things. I even like I just do it. I'm filling this bottle up with cool rocks. This is like alcohol. This is alcohol, but it had like alcohol in it. I just found it on the ground and I just pulled the label off. But it looks like a potion bottle like you would see in Dungeons and Dragons. And then I put like rocks that I found on the ground, or like people give me rocks and I put them in, and it makes you feel like you're a wizard and shit. But I don't. But there's people who they're like, no, you gotta watch out. That shit'll you'll get mystic powers. I'm not really in that belief system, but not knocking people. You're good at finding curbside free stuff. That's and I live in a city that's like a kind of a dump. Like people just throw shit out all the time. It's great. This city there's all types of crap. Some cities are like that. Some cities are pretty pristine, but here in Memphis, it's like there's useful shit all over the place. Pretty. So, politics offers a better explanatory framework than personal disposition. Right. So it's not about like, the power of positive thinking. It's about like, well, it's kind of political, and we're not just talking about like President Trump. We're talking about like the flow of power within society, right? Social power, like that's what politics is, right? And so, a lot of people don't want to talk about politics. They're like, do not talk to me about politics, but I'll talk to you all day about the law of attraction. And it's like, okay, you're in la la land. And the thing is, like, if you actually want to like make a meaningful change in society, you have to like start like engaging in politics. Like the law of attraction is just like only going to get you so far in terms of like actually changing society for the better. That, the negative thinker can use the experience of failure to confront the gross inequalities of everyday life in the United States. How so? Like what Jeremy talking about how they fail in the job market. Yeah, my failures in the job market happen because I don't play games and stand alone. That's what the article is talking about. Because the job market or the marketplace is a place of lots of gross inequalities, which we could talk about in the United States, absolutely. From the perspective of feminism, failure has often been a better bet than success. Where feminine success is always measured by male standards, and gender failure often means being relieved of the pressure to measure up to patriarchal ideals, not succeeding at womanhood can offer unexpected pleasures. And I put in my notes, failure can signify a rejection of a failed system. Where you're like, you know what? I'm done with this whole like patriarchal manhood, womanhood shit. And people are like, you're not a true man. Or like, oh, you're not a real woman. And it's like, no, I'm not. I failed in this stupid ass society. Now, the issue with that is like, well, there's consequences to be doing it, right? Because if you're not considered a man or a woman, you're going to have negative. Society will not treat you the best, right? And sometimes you'll put yourself in danger doing that kind of stuff, right? So, but that what it does is that it does signify like, okay, you're living in a system that doesn't treat human beings as human beings. Human beings are treated as tropes and like categories to just prop up, people who have the most power. Okay, so fall outside of patriarchal norms and can recreate some of the meaning of their genders. Can gender mean the defining of one's being? Right. So we asked that question in the beginning. If you're saying like, you know what, if somebody, let's take for example the man, like you're not a man. You're not a man. You cry too much. And you don't hit the gym. You're not buff. you don't even know how to tie a tie. You're not a man. And you say you respond like, well, maybe I don't want to be a man. Well, then you're failing in your manhood. It's like, yep, I am. I'm a failed man, right? So then what? Then you're like, so who are you then? And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna create who I am, right? That's the start. And this is what. Maybe this is what queerness is, right? Or this is what part of queerness is what this article is trying to propose. It's like, it's you rejecting this failed system and like actually being the true person that you are, right? Right. And so in that way, like not only is this about gender, it's about like who you truly are as a human being. What's ironic is that some of the most successful people, at least in entertainment, were playing with genders. Oh, okay. Some of the most successful people, like Bowie or something, or Prince, those people. Yeah, I mean, there's a few. And yeah, those people got a lot of success from doing that. Sorry, stepping on a wire here. Okay. But, there's also plenty of people that are very successful who just perpetuate toxic masculinity or like subordinate femininity, and they get successful based off of that too. So I don't know. It's just both sides are, and I would argue, unfortunately, in our society, people who push that patriarchal norms, most of the time they become more successful than people who try and flip the script, which is sad, but there are instances of success where that does happen. Yeah. Yeah, Prince, Madonna. Yeah, Madonna is cool. Michael Jackson. Marlon Brando? Really? How did because he cried? Marlon Brando, isn't he like a macho dude? I don't know. But yeah, people like Prince was highly successful. Michael Jackson was often called like gay in a derogatory term, and he actually like pushed back against that. So I don't know. Yeah, it's just something to think about. So what's here? Contradictions of a society obsessed with meaningless competition. By implication, it also reveals the precarious models of success by which American families live and die. Right. And then so I put in my notes with that quote, like, right. Let me reread that. Contradictions of society obsessed with meaningless competition. I put like sports. Sport often, sports are fun, but I think at least here in the United States of America, but probably like everywhere in the world, right? Sports is like huge, and sometimes you have to think of like, why? Well, the reason why is not just because they're entertaining to watch and not because they're gauges of greatness. It's really because they just like perpetuate and maintain and like popularize patriarchal norms, right? And that's why they're so successful. They're marketable. They offer a lot of capital to a country. But they're kind of meaningless in a way. I mean, just think you don't have to think very hard to come to this realization. Look at the sport of American football, right? So popular in America, but what it's so, and it's entertaining to watch people play games and compete. That's cool, but I guess what I don't like is the whole. It's just so blown so way out of proportion, and also the way we like deify players is weird, right? And then we call them great. It's like, dude, you're literally just like moving a ball from one side of a field to another, right? I know it's hard, but it's like, isn't that a little strange? I think I've talked about this before. Like, sports are weird, don't you think? They're kind of strange, It's not strange that a game is being played, and of course they have rules, and sometimes the rules can be arbitrary because that's what makes it interesting. But the way that it's just blown so way out of proportion, and how much money we put into them, and how much we deify the players is like, why do we have so much respect for these people? It's good to respect everybody, but we respect these people because they're able to move a ball from one side of the field to. It's just kind of weird in this very strange, restricted way. Yeah, and I think so. But even Canada, Australia, European countries, sports are extremely extremely revealed. Like soccer. I mean, think about soccer is the most famous game in the world. All the other countries call it football. Where did the weirdos in America that call it soccer, right? All right. But yeah, it's just so you can't use your hands to touch. You have to just kick it. I think you can use your head and use your body, but you can't use your hands. How arbitrary, right? Which is fine. Like, okay, that's the rules of the game, right? That gives you restrictions, so it makes it fun because it gives you a challenge. Okay, fine. But the way that we celebrate, like, oh my God, that was so cool. Like, why? Because he kicked a ball into a net. I mean, it's cool, but it's not like that damn cool. I remember I had a philosophy teacher, and I would say, like, it's interesting because really sports are kind of like a personification or like a metaphor for like the process of fertilization. And I was like, you gotta have a point there. Like the ball is basically the sperm, and where it's going is basically like, the point of fertilization. The sperm is going to. If you look at all games, like basketball, even baseball. With baseball, you use a bat and you hit the ball, and it goes like, and you use this like phallus type object to hit the ball. He's like thinking like, and it's kind of, there's a little truth in that, because even like, American football is like, it's kind of like sperm fighting to go into the end zone, which is kind of like, it's sort of like a copulation. And it's just reaffirming like patriarchal, reproductive, what was the word they used in the article? Reproductive maturity, right? Everything is broken down based off of and even on the subconscious level, we're kind of getting reiterated these norms. Yep, yeah, gotta go, Nadia. Okay, bye-bye, see you later. See you later. But yeah, it's just interesting. And then terms like serious and rigorous tend to be code words in academia as well as other contexts for disciplinary correctness. They signal a form of training and learning that confirms what is already known according to approved methods of knowing, but they do not allow for visionary insights or flights of fancy. Yeah. And, what they're saying there is, some forms of academics are considered as serious and others are not. Like the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, those are the serious ones. But like the humanities, they're not serious. And let's not get started with feminism. That's a joke, right? Even though like I would argue like they're just as serious, right? But of course like STEM, and not to knock science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, those are good, but they're not more valuable than the humanities and the arts, right? But the thing is with the STEM, like they're applauded and valued higher because like there are ways that corporations use mathematicians, engineers, right, scientists to generate capital, right? So that's what, ultimately like our education system is just a way to produce laborers to generate capital, right? So that's why where in the humanities that's all harder to do. Like it still happens, right? You still have all this humanities, art and science, art and literature and people writing books to just sell them, or like a lot of the arts is just you just create forms of like entertainment that really doesn't have much soul, or music, right? You see a lot of this pop music today has no real substance to it. It's just made to sell shit. Right? So even that, but it's a lot harder, right? It's a lot harder to do that than it is like mathematics, and with a lot of engineering and mathematics that's used in warfare, right? Military operations. So a lot of that is highly useful in the terms of imperialism, which is lots of people argue is the final form of capitalism. That's like when capitalism is at its like final form. Right? So it's highly useful in capitalist countries, right? So yeah, the people deemed as successful nowadays are not intelligent, sophisticated, and have integrity. Right. So yeah, that's basically what the article is arguing. It's like, look at people who are quote unquote successful, like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. Is like, are these the people we should be aspired to be? We probably should fail because then we would have moral character. We would have ethics, a sense of ethics and morality, right? But you're not going to get all that financial reward, right? So, but that's what he's saying. The project of generating new forms of knowing and alternative ways to understand the problem, okay. Knowledge of canons identifies scholars with an aptitude for maintaining and confronting the dictates of the discipline. My bad. Got a little tripped up there. Unregulated territories of failure, loss, and unbecoming must make a long detour around disciplines and ordinary ways of thinking. Universities, and by implication high schools, squash rather than promote quirky and original thought. Right, right. We were just talking about, like, it's about the STEM, which, by the way, like, like I was saying before, I love math and science, don't get me wrong, but humanities are very important too, and we do say math is more important. Well, it's not more important than art, right? Art's just as important, rather than promote And so when you promote quirky and original thought, now you're getting into the world of art. Of course, you could take mathematics and physics, and you could get quirky and original art, but then you have to put in your artistic mind, like Einstein's theory of relativity, which is quite quirky and original, but still we're merging the stuff together. So I put evaluating the best let me repeat, evaluating the best at conforming to status quo rather than imaginative problem solving. Right. That's what we test for in schools. How best can you conform to the status quo? We'll give you an A there, right? But if you do imaginative problem solving, where you're thinking outside the box, you get an F. And so that's how failure is that's good. We should be doing that. Let's see. How do you define success in relation to the article, Neil? Well, I think one of the things the article is asking you to do is you should just reject success altogether. We gotta abandon ideas of success and failure, and the whole notion of success and failure, as concepts. We should just that's not what life is about. Life is not about succeeding or failing. And when you fail in this, the only reason why you're failing is because you're in a system that where you either succeed or fail. And I guess the article is saying we got to get out of that system, and let's not even talk about success or failure. Let's just talk about being a human being. Right? I think that's what the article is pushing forward. So yeah, let's not even define what success is, because that's going to depend on the person. There's various definitions of what makes somebody happy or feel fulfilled, or that kind of thing. Where are we? I want to become successful based on my intelligence and for speaking my mind. If I can't do that, I would be easily stifled. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a nice criteria of success. I would say it's not the only criteria. I will also say that there are many different kinds of intelligence, right? But yeah, speaking your mind is good, and being able to apply your intelligence in meaningful ways. That's nice. Not so much the abolition of prison. Oh, okay. So this article brings up abolition, and it says hey man, abolition is not so much about the abolition of prisons, but the abolition of a society that can have prisons, right? And I've brought that up in various videos where I've talked about abolition. So abolition is not about just abolishing prisons. What it's about is about getting rid of a society that could even have a prison, that could even have slavery, that could have the wage. And therefore not abolition as the elimination of anything, but abolition as the founding of a new society. Not the elimination of anything, but the founding of a new society, right? So it's about failure as creativity. You're creating. So a lot of people will say abolition is we gotta get rid of prisons, we gotta abolish the police, and it's people will be well, if we don't have police, then how the hell are we gonna be safe? It's well, why are we even having this discussion? why we live in a society where police are necessary. Why? Right? Why? Maybe we should work toward a society where police aren't necessary. And then the counter would be like, well, that's not realistic. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, for police haven't always existed in human history, right? There have been societies that have existed where there's no police and they've existed successfully. And then people be like, well, those societies are barbaric societies and uncivilized. It's like, no, that's not true. Right? All you have to do is study like the humanities, right? You gotta study history, like the fields of academia that are not deemed successful, right? See, this is why those forms of academia are pushed aside because people know what the power structures don't want you to know about that. Like, oh, actually, there have been many societies throughout human history where there have been no prisons or police, and they have been very successful, right? And maybe we need to go back to those societies, but of course, like police and prisons, they're generations, they generate capital, and we live in a capitalist society, and therefore that's why they're here, right? Right. So. But you know what? Success and failure don't mean anything in the long term for humanity. Yeah, that's what the article is saying. Ideas of success and failure only apply to like our current like oppressive, discriminatory societies, right? But you get rid of the oppression and the discrimination, then these terms kind of fade away. They're non-applicable, right? Oh, hello, guy you can trust. Have you read Meditations on Moloch? No. Scott Alec. It basically breaks down what he called multipolar traps or really crab bucket situation. Okay, cool. Crab bucket, like the crab pulls down the other crabs to escape, but so that no crab escapes yet. Okay, that's good. No, I have not read that. We should laugh at both success and failure because they are gambles, and gambling is supposed to be fun. Oh, okay. Let's see here. Emphasize mutuality, collectivity, plasticity, diversity, and adaptability. Illegibility may in fact be one way of escaping the political manipulation. Mm-hmm. Avoid co-optation. We talked about that. Ingenuous. What did I write here? That's it. Ingenuous practices. Oh, from the dominating power. Oh, okay, that's what I wrote. Subjects who are manipulated precisely when they become illegible and visible to the state. Undocumented workers, visible queers, racialized minorities. Othering people. That's another form of failures, right? Who is a failure in our society? Well, undocumented workers, visible queers, racialized minorities. These are failures, right, in our society, right? But, they're not, these are just, like we're talking about, they're just terms that are just thrown out to support, the status quo. But outside of the status quo, they are meaningless. It's like, these are human beings, right? And what do you mean undocumented work? There is no, like, what? It's like, a person doesn't have to be documented to be a person. Like, a person doesn't have to be documented to work, right? But we've created these arbitrary things, requirements, so that the flow of power can be managed, right? Let's see. Success and failure is definitely financially coded. Yeah, owning property, having your labor compensated. Then for elites, it's something like cultural capital. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's basically success in the society we live in today. It's like, well, how much money you got? That's success. And, a lot of that is real, too, because you need success. You need money to live, to put a roof over your head, to, like, buy food, to buy shelter and water, clean water and such. So it's not, it's not just made in our minds, right? It's real, but it has been constructed, right? And if we start attacking the constructs, then we can challenge, like, well, what do these things really mean? That's why I always push, like, these are philosophy. These are issues of philosophy. What to think about how to see, unlike a state, want new rationales for knowledge production, different aesthetic standards for ordering or disordering space, other modes of political engagement than those conjured by the liberal imagination. Yeah, right. Liberalism is just as unimaginative as conservatism. It's kind of sad, huh? So you got the term, the conservative and the liberal. Yeah, the left, liberal, the right, conservative. And it's like, we talked about before, the liberal now has kind of been co-opted by capitalism. And now it's become like, there's all these terms that people, in America, we say neoliberal. In like Europe, they use like altruism. I think altruism is a term that's often thrown around to describe this concept of like using corporations and the free market to like make the world a better place, right? And it's still just as oppressive. The contrasts that structure how we're compensating and for what categories of labor. Right. It's true. Disciplines qualify and disqualify, legitimate and delegitimate, reward and punish. Most important, they statically reproduce themselves and inhibit dissent. So spark creative thinking rather than squash it. Right? Instead of squashing creativity, we should spark it, right? But our society say no. And so when people fail, lots of people who are considered failures, they're actually creatives, right? They're creating alternatives. You fail. And the people who succeed are just like pushing up the status quo, right? Which is, the problem is when you push up the status quo, you're just supporting these harmful systems. So is failure a good thing or a bad thing, right? A theoretical production that does not need a visa from some common regime to establish its validity. Right. So, that's a big thing nowadays because immigration and the illegal alien and all this bullshit that is constantly thrown out. We have to untrain ourselves so that we can read the struggles and debates back into questions that seem settled and resolved. Question long-standing assumptions. Right? Refuse professionalism, forge collectivity, retreat to the external world beyond the ivied walls, resist mastery, failure. As a refusal, failure is a refusal of mastery. Right? This idea of like, well, you're very good at it. Well, no, I'm not. Like, I know one example is me as a philosopher. Wow, you've mastered philosophy. Impossible. One could never master philosophy, right? Right. Because you're constantly like questioning ideas and like concepts, and no matter how much you read, you're always reevaluating like notions of stuff, and that you can take that to religion and ideologies and like even ways of being. Queerness is an example of that too, right? There was a time it was like, there's only gay men. And it took a long time to acknowledge women, right? It's like, women are gay, we got lesbian, so then there was just gay and lesbian, then bisexual. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There's also trans, and now there's like non-binary, genderqueer, gender non-conforming, and then there's asexual people, and then, there's all these intersex and like all these identifiers, right? And it just keeps growing. It just keeps developing, right? Will it ever stop? No, right? Because there's never like an end to ways of being, right? It's kind of like the color wheel, right? How many colors are there? there's infinite amounts of color because you could, just like numbers, like how many numbers are there? There's infinite numbers because you can count all the way to infinity, or you can how many numbers are between 1 and 0? Well, infinite, right? Because the decimals can just keep going forever, right? Right. That's how ways of being are. Where are we? I don't even know. I think we might have to. Do we have to do a part 2? Let me see. Because we've been going a while. Yeah. I think we might have to do it. Might continue this later. Because there's a lot to this one. Because I think we've been going an hour and a half. Although, some streams go for like 3 hours. I don't know if I want to do that this time. Let's see. We'll go a little further. Let's see how we get to it. Analysis as a mode of conversation rather than mastery. All right, yep. So a mode of conversation rather than mastery, right? Can yield a vision of coexistence that does not require making others' life worlds extinct or provisional. Right. So no exploitation. Conversation rather than mastery indeed seems to offer one very concrete way of being in relation to another form of being, and now knowing without seeking to measure that life modality by the standards that are external to it. And then privilege, the naive or nonsensical. Stupid. And then it's the parentheticals is stupidity, right? Which, the idea is, well, I don't know this. That was one of the ideas of this live stream, or just my YouTube channel, my YouTube videos in general. Like, okay, I disagree with this thing. I posted a number of videos where I'm like, yeah, I kind of disagree with this person, but I leave the comment section open, and now I'm trying to engage with people in real time to be like, well, I disagree with it, but you agree, so let's talk it out. Let's talk it out. Right. So, and that's what I'm not an expert, but let's see if we can get to a common, or maybe not a common point, but at least a common understanding. Okay, I see your point of view, at least, as opposed to I don't understand your point of view at all. That's what I don't want to be. And then learning is a two-way street, and you cannot teach without a dialogic relation to the learner. Right. That's what we're talking about. Okay. I think we will stop here. Let's see here. I think okay. I'm trying to make sure I keep my place. So I'm going to go ahead and put a bookmark tab in there. Because if we were to keep going, we'd probably be another hour. Now, again, we've gone streams for 3 hours, but not this time. Not this time. We got to control ourselves. I'll just put book tab here, and that'll be fine. And then we will do a part 2 to this stream. Just do my paper clip. Boom. Okay. We'll put a pause here. Just want to thank those who have watched, and who are watching. Thanks a lot. It was fun hanging out. And of course, there's people who are going to watch later on. Glad to have you watching, and if you want to put a comment below, that's fine too. I will happily respond to comments after, if you're watching this or recorded. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. No, I don't care about that shit. You don't have to subscribe or like, or I don't give a fuck. But if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm not stopping you from doing it. But I'm not. You'll never see me hit that like button, smash that subscribe. No, I don't give a fuck. But yeah, thanks for joining the conversation, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Until then, peace out. Bye-bye.